Yeah. I don't know if you can see this, but it kind of looks like a vagina.
Hi, I'm your friend Claude here with cousin Adam, and this is episode 13 of WAMCast. It's been a while.
See, you were slow before we started recording, and as soon as you hit that button, I'm like, there, what? But yeah, it's been a while. Like you said, it's been like 2 months, and we've got a lot of crap to talk about. Not really. We're kind of just doing this on the fly to get back in the swing of things, the thing of the swings.
This is on the fly. I think we have to probably pay for that, so I should probably not sing it.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah, that's one of those things where
Yeah.
licensing and crap. So, so what's been going on?
I got a new job, and
Well, it's like the same job but a different place, right, or something.
I mean, my function is listed the same way officially.
Mm-hmm.
I still cook for a living, I guess. But I do actually much less cooking at the new job, which is both a relief of burden and a source of greater depression, in the sense that I'm not really creatively expressing myself through food or anything like that, just sort of putting it together.
So are you doing like less cooking, more finger pointing, like do this, you do that kind of thing, or?
Well, yeah, there's that too, but in the actual putting together of plates and things, I'm not really cooking in the traditional sense, just sort of taking components out of their heat source and slapping it together in a burrito or in a taco or whatever. So basically, I guess I should explain, I've gone from what's billed as a gastropub, I don't know, like traditional bar food / attempts at fancier, more pretentious dishes, cooked to order for the most part. Transferred from that to kind of, made ahead of time Mexican Tex-Mex type stuff, which is a lot more reuse of the same ingredients and different end products and whatever. So, but it came with a perceived positional promotion, I guess. I'm technically assistant kitchen manager, or what would be considered a sous chef in a real kitchen. And I was a peon in the other one, so I guess there's that. And I make $1 more an hour than I did, even though I was told I'd make $1.50 more per hour. So that's always fun to iron out. But those are the biggest
bastards.
Yeah, it's been eating up a lot more of my time too, because my first day on the job the place was, I mean, it looked like a war zone. There was fucking dirty wood everywhere and like random tools and nails and debris. They were still like putting it together from the old owners and remodeling and shit. So my first week was basically spent helping to build the fucking place. And they had a mad rush to open on Cinco de Mayo. We opened a Mexican place on Cinco de Mayo. Whatever prestige or whatever that accomplishment brings with it. When I started on the last day of April, which I believe is the 31st, so I had 6 days. And none of the food had been tried before. They didn't even like really do their homework. A lot of their goal is to rip off like the Chipotle business model, and the fact that I worked there before was enticing to the owner and everything, except for the fact that like he doesn't really know how they do what they do. Didn't really ask me for any like inside info or anything, so it's not really working out that great.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I mean, the Chipotle business model is successful, right? So I mean, I can see why you probably read about it on the internet or something and was like, yeah, let's do that. You work there, go. It's like, but I'm not. What? Like this.
Well, before I knew all that, I was gung ho, but yeah, it's just kind of it's very frustrating in a lot of ways. But I still like it better than what I was doing for the last 2 years. So look on the bright side.
Yeah, it's a step up, right? I guess in my neck of the woods, I am seriously considering a career change. Basically, because when I walk into work, I can't fucking stand it anymore. So I'm basically like checked out, and I tend to I work and I do what I'm supposed to do, but at times I get a little like start slacking off, you know what I mean? And I just can't really stand it anymore. So I took a couple of days off around my birthday, and I went to the library and started applying to other jobs. I really, I'm in that position where I want to just walk in and quit, but that's absolutely ridiculous because I have bills, I have a family, I can't just quit my job and hope for the best.
Right.
So it's very frustrating because I don't want to do it, and I just daily I just try to figure out ways to get out of it, but I can't, and it's really sucky. I am actually starting a new job at the current job in August, but it's basically the same thing. Just I'm handling stuff from a different part of the country, so I'm sure it'll be the same BS as what I'm doing right now. But right now it's just really busy and we're really behind. So a lot of our customers that are calling us and stuff are really upset about things, and it's just like it's really stupid. And I kind of it's hard for me to empathize because I don't really care about your problems.
Right.
Like I care about your problems. See, now Kitty makes me happy. That's funny. But yeah, it's just I'm basically at the point where I'm checked out. So yeah, I'm looking for other stuff. Yeah, that's basically it.
Well,
so
I know that process very well because it seems like the only thing
yeah.
I'm really good at is getting insanely fed up with whatever job I have at the time.
Yeah, you get really fed up. Well, see, the thing is, I've been at my company for like 7 years now. Like June 2nd was my 7-year anniversary. So it's like, I'm pushing 10 years. I'm pushing a decade at this place, and it's really hard in the sense to leave that. Like I'm already ensconced there. I have my vacation time. I get like 3 weeks a year now. I have my vacation time. All my benefits are through there. I've got a 401k worth like thousands of dollars, and it's like, obviously you just roll it over, be it another job or whatever, or just take the money. But what I mean? It's just like I feel like I can't leave because it's just easy with like the benefits, and my pay is decent. It's not what I want it to be, but it's decent. So it's really hard to just like come to that realization that I just can't do it anymore, and that's kind of where I'm at. So now I'm feeling helpless because I can't get out of it. So it's just like it's a big freaking circle. And
do you ever find yourself wishing that you were just some kind of fucking simpleton that was just happy with whatever was put in front of him?
Yeah, sometimes. I feel like I'm too complex as a person to be happy with anything. I mean, let's not get me wrong. I mean, my personal life, I'm happy. My family life, I'm happy. That stuff's fine. But like, if I'm spending most of my time at a job, I need to be satisfied. And it's like, I'm not. And you're right. I wish sometimes I was just like happy, like, oh, I got a job, I shouldn't complain, ha 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 ha, but I don't feel that way sometimes. Just like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Especially when I'm unhappy at a job, that's literally all I can think about is how I'm wasting my time, and I only have one life, and this is how I'm fucking spending X amount of it, and it's just like watching it go down the toilet, etc. And then it's like this avalanche of fucking depression and regret. But it's like, I don't know, it only fires me up to do something about it for so long. I mean, it's really hard. Let's not pretend, like, sure, people will probably hear that and be like, yeah, you're making excuses, blah, blah, blah. Go out and get what you want then. But let's not pretend it's easy to exist outside of the system as it's set up, like for the majority of working class people to be fucking just that, to be little worker bees for whatever fucking industry needs widgets turned out. I mean, like that's the whole point of capitalism and consumerism and whatever else. Like we're supposed to be little cogs in that machine, but I don't think we're meant for that.
I feel like we're in like one of those dystopian worlds where like people aren't allowed to be happy or have like their own thoughts, and they're just supposed to do whatever. And then like there's like those select few of people that like, no, this isn't right, and then they like change the world and wake everybody up. But obviously we don't live in that kind of world, so we're basically just the whiners, I guess. But no, you're right though. I mean, people will say, yeah, then go do what you want to do. You know what? You gotta take a chance if you want to do that. But like, I can't take a chance with the livelihood that I'm not gonna have bring in money, and then we're gonna be poor. Just because I walked out of my job and was like, I quit, I don't like this. And then out of desperation, after not finding a job for a month, I've got to take the first thing that comes along, which makes it even more miserable. So it's like, well, it just there's going to come a point where I break, but I'm not there yet.
Well, it's especially frustrating that I'm sure from your perspective anyway that now you're in an even more, I guess, threatened position, being that you're, part of a family now. You're relied on to actually provide for
Yep.
more than just yourself now. So it's like there's that added pressure almost.
Yep.
Sorry if you hadn't been thinking about it that way, but how could you not?
No, I mean, no, I have been, and that's like the number one thing that hinders me, and like I don't blame that for me being unhappy,
No,
but
yeah.
like, if I was single, or whatever, I didn't have anybody else to worry about, I would probably quit, and then if worse came to worse, I would probably move back in with my parents,
Yeah.
which is crap, but I mean, I could do that if I wanted to. I'm not too proud to beg.
Well, a lot of
But
people are doing that, especially in our age group now.
yeah,
It's not like it's
I want
rare.
to. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to do that,
Right.
but yeah, it's just like, yeah. I mean, it's definitely the first and foremost on my mind, and why every time I feel like doing it, I'm like, I can't. You just cannot do that.
Right.
So, here we are again. But I don't know. I mean, I like I said, I applied for some stuff, so hopefully I'll hear back, and if I get an interview, I'll just call in sick again or something, and be like, yeah, sorry.
Right.
But yeah, I guess I'm on the cusp of. I feel like I'm on the cusp of greatness, but I just can't make that leap yet until I have something a little more solid.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I
what
don't
you
know.
can do.
It all comes back to, I guess, a larger and larger topic, an argument that, none of us are really prepared, especially here in America, in our schools, in our education publicly. We're not really prepared for actual life. Like, we're just force fed a bunch of historical quote unquote facts, because some of them, as we find out later, aren't necessarily all that true.
Correct.
But basically, it's not. You don't learn really necessary hands-on skills. Like I don't. I still to this day, I'm ashamed to admit it, but the truth is, I honestly have no idea how to go about like getting a loan for a house or a car, or like even what that process entails, or I still like struggle with doing my taxes. Um, I'm very ill prepared for the real world, and
Yeah.
when you don't have those building blocks, how the hell like it's part of the reason we're stuck in this system of being somebody else's worker bee. At least for me, anyway. It's just very frustrating.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're right a lot. Well, I mean, when it comes to taxes, like I don't do my taxes. I use tax software that says put in this number that's in this box, and I do it, and then it calculates it for me, and I hope that it's right.
Exactly.
That's what I do. I don't know my taxes. I mean, yeah, I've gotten a car loan before, but yeah, we've been talking about at some point in the next couple of years we're going to want to get a house. Like I have no idea where to start.
Right.
So I guess that's what your parents are for, because they probably didn't know where to start, and they asked their parents, and I'm going to do the same thing. So
yeah. Except in my case, my parents spent 25 years in their house and just got booted over less than $2,000 of fucking property tax debt. So I don't have that option.
Yeah, that's whatever. That's still crappy.
Yeah, it's bullshit, but that's reality. So I don't necessarily have that resource either. It's just
Well, it's weird. It's one of those things where like I would have wanted to go like hang out at your house one last time, because we spent so much time there when we were younger, and I didn't get the chance to do that. It's like shit. But
what's amazing?
I mean, that's just my selfish thing. But
well, yeah, of course. Who doesn't? I would want that for like if your parents lost their house or sold their house or whatever. Like I would want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
What I found throughout that process is how similar it is to death, almost. Like all of a sudden, like once it's over, whatever stuff you're doing to like tie up the loose ends is just busy work. Like your connection is really kind of severed. Everything just kind of looks. It doesn't look like a home, like the place you knew anymore. It just looks kind of like gray and lifeless, and like you start to see all the imperfections glaring out at you, and it's really crazy. Yeah. It's almost like you're becoming detached by the second. It's very weird.
That's a really good analogy. I mean, I've never gone through that, but that puts it in perspective for someone that's not lived the situation and knows what's going on.
Right.
That's crazy. It's
like
death.
Well, that's my experience with it. I mean, not to drag the conversation down too far, but when Jess died, what I started seeing, like, I started looking around and seeing like houses for what they really were, and cars for what they like, just all the imperfections in the world just glare out at you, and like. What I compared it to was like a set, like a movie or a sitcom set, like with nobody on it. It was just kind of empty, and that's the backdrop for your life, but it doesn't have any meaning anymore, kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, on a side note, is somebody moving furniture at your house, or what the hell is that?
Sort of. You could say that.
It's just like bang, bang. I'm like, and you're like talking, and I'm like listening, but it's like, I'm like, what is that? I'm listening. What? What? It's sorry.
There's a
Whatever.
mini Kiss concert happening in my living room.
Huh? That's weird. Gene, are you there?
That's if you want to talk to him, it's an extra $45 a minute.
Of course it is, because he's a greedy bastard.
Yep.
Not saying anything against their music, but him as a person, he's pretty terrible. From what I've seen, anyway. I mean, that's just what he projects, and I'm not one to judge, but yeah, he's pretty terrible. So let's talk about some better things. If you want to move on.
Literally anything is probably a better thing.
Anything's better. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's death, and I mean, I'm glad that we can talk about it in kind of a somewhat lighthearted, humorous manner, but it's still pretty kind of crappy,
Oh, it is
thinking that like, well, it's only 8:15, but I've got to go to bed in like 3 hours, and I got to get up and go to my job. And it's like, son of a bitch, I don't want to.
Sweet dreams.
Well, a couple momentous retirements just recently happened as well. One of them being my dad just retired, which is fucking sane. Because like I never thought, because it's one of those milestones that like you didn't really, like I expected it, but then when it happened, it like leading up to it happened really fast, and all of a sudden my dad's retired, and it's like, wow, like I can't believe it. I mean, and I guess in my defense, he took early retirement,
right?
Because there's talk about changing the retirement age to 70, so he wanted to retire early and get his name in the system so he can start drawing Social Security and his pension before they did that. So his the payouts he's getting aren't quite as much, but like to him, I guess they were negligible on like if he waited 3 more years. So that was just a weird personal thing that happened, and I had a lot of mixed emotions about it because his job was like our livelihood, and actually his job and my mom's job, but it was like our livelihood. It's like all we knew that he did, and like all the things that we did in relation to his work, like his softball team, like going to see him there, stuff like that.
Right.
It was just really weird that it's over. Like that's his. Basically, he did what he had to do, and now he's done. And he's been working since he was like 12 years old,
right.
On farms and stuff. So I mean, he's worked 50 years out of his life. He's 62. Right. So it's like, holy crap, like he deserves a rest now, and I guess it's pretty cool, and I'm sure he's enjoying his time. But it was just a weird thing that came out when it happened. It was like he said he was going to do it, and we were like, oh, Dad's retiring in a year, and then all of a sudden it's like, crap, he's only got like 2 weeks before he retires, like out of nowhere. So it's kind of weird. It's just a weird, and of course I'm jealous because I don't want to work and I want to retire also. But so it's like, gosh.
Well, obviously it's one of those moments that you always knew was coming at some point, as a child, like someday that's going to happen, and then all of a sudden someday is here. Kind of fucks with your mind a little bit,
It does, and not to be super morbid about it, but in reality, and the truth of the matter is that the next thing for him is death. And like,
well, hopefully there's something
I can't think
in
about
between.
That. Yeah. Well, I mean, he's got years left, and there's
maybe he'll get a few ball games in or something.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, holy crap! Like, it's not like he's gonna die tomorrow. I mean, I guess anybody could die tomorrow, but
right.
It's one of those things where it's like, man, the next big thing that's gonna happen to him is he's gonna die, and that kind of like puts a lot of things in perspective too, and which churns up the emotions and stuff, because it's like, crap, he's did all that stuff throughout his life, and now he's retired, and now he's basically like riding off into the sunset, to give you a stupid Hollywood cliche or something. But you know what I mean? That's kind of like,
yeah.
It's just really weird to like wrap my head around that. Like you said, it was something that someday Dad's not going to work and he can enjoy himself, but it's like, holy crap, it's already here. What's next?
Right.
But my mom, she's going to work for probably another 5 years, so I don't have to like start fretting about that. But
right.
Well, is your dad's retired too, isn't he? Didn't he retire early or something? Or I don't.
Yeah, he did. Like retired. He cashed in his retirement. He quit his job.
Yeah.
But I mean, he has nothing to fall back on.
Yeah.
He had used up all his retirement money, and you know, like that's part of the reason that they ended up in the financial straits they ended up in.
Mm.
Um, he's sort of like a cross between you and your dad, I guess. He was like feeling the strain of a job that he just couldn't go back to one more day,
Mm.
and just cashed in his chips, and now he delivers papers. I mean, it's not necessarily what you picture. Like he's not on a bike riding around town throwing shit on people's lawn or whatever. But
Yeah,
if
that
you
would be kind of funny actually if he did that.
right,
Like,
they
I'm
give
gonna
him
deliver these on bike.
exactly. They'd probably be better for him.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
they give him a car, and he has a route, and he gets tips and everything. Like, I mean, he's happier, but it is a pretty stark reality that he probably won't be able to actually retire in the traditional sense.
Right.
You know.
Hmm.
So you were trying to lead it away from somber topics, and I brought it right back. What else you got?
Well, no, I started. No, I started because I said the next thing that's gonna happen to my
Oh,
dad is like he's gonna like there's no other milestones left in his
right,
life. So I guess maybe like if I have another kid, he'll have like another grandkid.
right.
But you know what I mean? Like that's I guess
Well,
the milestone. Whatever.
it just
Life.
it's amazing how fast 50 years can go by, and it's amazing,
Yeah.
that like we're approaching our mid 30s now. So
Yeah.
like it's just as much, at least for me anyway, just as much as you have that sense of bewilderment at like, holy fuck, how the hell did my dad retire already?
Yeah.
I'm sort of starting to feel that way about like, how the fuck am I at the age I'm at? You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
33 as of 2 days ago, or yesterday actually, and you're 34 as of 2 days ago. It's like
Yeah.
it's not old by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's
No.
around now when it starts to set in. Like, oh, we're moving now.
Yeah. Like we're really moving. Like this
Yeah.
train, it's reached like whatever. What's that called? Like the not the whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Like the peak. It's reached its peak.
Ah, yeah.
And you know what I mean? Well, I don't know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I know we're really moving. I mean, I don't think I'm going to actually feel old until I get 50. I think
Yeah.
everything leading up to 50, I'll be fine. But when I hit 50, I'm going to be like, shit.
Right.
Like, there better be some changes over the next 16 years. I'll tell you that. So,
Right.
but yeah, and like I said, I've been at my jobs for 7 years. Like, that's nuts, too. Like, holy crap. And like, I'm fully vested into their pension plan. So now my thought is too is like, do I want to stay there just so when I retire I get a pretty decent pension?
Right.
But then I'm like, holy crap, that's like 30 more years of what I do, and like that makes me want to freaking jump off a building. Like it really, you know what I mean? Like there's no, I can't.
There's
Oh,
stark realities on both sides of the coin there.
yeah, sucks. Yep. Well, anyway, so the other retirement I was talking about, I said there was two retirements, was the one and only David Letterman retired just a couple weeks ago now, actually. Why don't you talk about that? Because that's kind of something that was
All
a thing for you, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, how could it not be, right? Like all
Right.
and all that's going to really do is make me again talk about my own mortality because well, I guess I feel about that the way you feel about your dad's retirement. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. He's I think the whole country kind of had the same experience that we did with his show. Like, for a long time, I think during the NBC years, everybody watched him pretty faithfully. I think for probably the first 10 maybe of his CBS run, everybody
Yeah.
watched him. And then I feel like after that, there was a kind of a fall off where people just didn't pay attention as much. Um,
Yeah.
and I did too. Like I wrote about it on Facebook. I put a post,
Hmm.
kind of talking about my feelings and everything. And it's like he just got to a point in American pop culture that, he sort of seemed like a fixture. Like he transcended being a human person. He was just sort of this like internationally known entity that just would always be there. And then like, this forces you to recognize, oh wait, things come to an end. Like you can't just always turn on the TV at 11:30 and have Dave Letterman on. I mean, it just even saying it now seems like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember when Johnny Carson retired. I remember how big of a deal that was. Um, but obviously, I mean, I was 10 when that happened, and so I didn't really have the attachment to him that I had to Dave, so it didn't really mean
Yeah,
as
that
much.
that was a different generation. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but I mean,
I do remember the hoopla.
I think, and he actually did it for less years than Dave Letterman did.
Mm.
But I think people had the same sort of attachment when you get to be that big, and yeah, it's hard. It's hard to like, it's just another one of those things that as you age and as you mature, I think what I put it when I wrote it on Facebook, the way I put it was life sometimes seems like a long, slow mugging, and that's it's kind of how it is. Like you just keep going on through life, and it just takes a little here and it takes a little there from you, and like yeah, I mean if you're lucky, you get to add other things that you didn't have before, and maybe enrich your life in different ways. But sometimes it just feels like all you do is lose things, and yeah, he's gone.
Yep, he is gone. Well, I mean, I think the sad thing about him too is that like, yeah, people are going to remember, Letterman, like you said, being a fixture, being someone that was already there. But I think unfortunately, a lot of what's going to be remembered about him is going to be like him not having the show that he wanted to have, or
Right.
like not being quite who he could be, because he was definitely at one point being groomed to take over for Johnny Carson, and of course we all know how Leno kind of like backdoored him, and I guess like when Dave was at NBC or whatever and was going to take over, I guess like he had some clashes, like some ideological clashes with like the network executives and stuff like that, so they were kind of
Right.
getting a little sour to him, and I think kind of Jay Leno saw that and kind of like went behind his back and like kind of wooed them, and then when they announced it was going to be Jay Leno, it was kind of like a punch in the gut for him, and I think he's always going to be remembered for that, not quite achieving what he wanted to achieve. I mean, he did great with his own show on CBS in his own right, and I liked that one better than Jay Leno, because like I've never been really a big fan of Jay Leno.
Right.
But yeah, unfortunately, I kind of feel like that's kind of like what his legacy is going to be. Like not quite there, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, it sucks.
But yeah, it does suck, and that's kind of like the reality. Even like when you have your dream job, and like you're in entertainment, you're in show business, you're in TV, it's like that kind of stuff happens, and it's like, man, even when you get to that point where you can basically get shut out and then just go to another station and be like, hey, they kind of screwed me, can you give me a show? They're like, yeah, of course we'll give you a show. But you know what I mean, like that kind of stuff happens. And like same thing happened with when Conan O'Brien took over for Leno at first, and then he like kicked him off when he decided to come back. You know what I mean? You remember that whole situation?
History definitely repeated itself.
And that was just like, I mean, can you really say that Jay Leno is a good person at that point? He's the asshole rich comic, I guess, whatever.
Right.
But
well, he's just the fucking company man, like just fucking like I said earlier when I was asking about, don't you just wish you were a fucking simpleton who's happy with whatever? That's Jay Leno,
Yeah.
And look, he's obviously a talented professional comic, who didn't get where he is based on absolutely nothing. But fact of the matter is, he's also a scumbag and, real good at like the dark side of business. It seems like.
Yeah, he's a backdoor man.
Right.
In
Exactly.
a weird sense of the word. But yeah, I mean, I think I definitely remember, being like engaged with the David Letterman show, and that was something that like my dad and I kind of bonded over a little bit throughout the years, because his show was on at like 11:30 at night, and even like in my early to late high school years or whatever, I didn't really stay up late, but I remember in the summertime it was like whatever, and like I watched Letterman nightly. That was like the thing I did in the summertime, was watch Letterman, and we had those top 10 books that we read and laughed about that a certain someone from my high school never gave me back. He may or may not own a bakery in Portland right now, so if you see him, ask for my top 10 book back. But
my restaurant may or may not use them for our desserts. It'd be located right next door to that place.
Yeah, it's true. I was kind of surprised that like the tavern kind of got bought out or whatever too, because that was one of our little haunts there when I was coming home for the summers, and we would go hang out. That was like the place we'd either start at or end up. So
right.
But anyway, yeah. So the Letterman thing was, that's just, to me. I mean, like you said, I haven't really paid much attention to it the last like probably 5 or 6 years. And I didn't even watch it when up to the end. I mean, I watched some clips of like the famous people coming on to say goodbye, and
Right.
I watched the last top 10 list, which is pretty funny because he had a bunch of famous people that were his friends.
Yeah.
Like Jim Carrey was there, Seinfeld, uh, things like that. But yeah, it's kind of it's like the passing of the torch, the end of an era kind of thing, and who's in Steve Colbert's taken over, right? Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
Um, I'm kind of curious just to see because he's not going to be in character when he does the show. He's going to be, I think, like a regular person, is what I'm hearing. Like he's not doing a character, so I'm kind of interested to see how he does it. I mean, I don't think it's going to be anywhere nearly like Dave. It's not. I mean, nobody's Dave Letterman.
Right.
But,
You can't. I don't know. I mean, I have nothing against Stephen Colbert. I didn't really
no.
enjoy. I was entertained on occasion by the Colbert Report.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like the reason he's not doing that character is, I'm sure, like, it just got old. I mean, it's got to be exhausting to try to be somebody that you're not actually like, all the time.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I mean, he's obviously another talented guy and whatever, and I don't have any personal ill will towards him or anything, but like, those shoes cannot be filled. It's gonna have to just, look, it's gonna be a totally different show. The crazy thing is, it's still gonna be late night. So like, it's gonna be the first time in history since 1982 that you haven't had a late night with David Letterman. So that's kind of crazy.
A long time.
And the other thing, like we said about like how he got dicked over with the Tonight Show and all that. During all this, I was inspired to go back and re-dive into the history of Dave Letterman's career and everything. And it's just still, to this day, it's mind-boggling that he was actually Johnny Carson's personal preferred pick for his replacement. And Johnny Carson's last public appearance on TV was on Late Night with Dave Letterman. And apparently he continued on for several years to anonymously or uncreditedly write jokes for Dave's monologue. So like, I mean, even after Dave went to CBS, he was still getting behind the scenes support from Johnny Carson, who never made another public appearance again. So I mean, when you factor things like that in, a lot of people kind of dismiss Dave's whole thing with that as sour grapes or whatever, but like that's pretty huge.
Yeah, that is pretty. Well, what makes me what's surprising to me is that unless I missed it or I didn't hear about it, like did Johnny Carson ever publicly like admonish like NBC for picking Jay Leno over Letterman? Like, you would have thought that he would have.
Right. I don't think he did, but yeah, I think that's the one piece that's missing from the puzzle is like, I guess I get it. I don't know. Maybe it's an era he comes from kind of thing, or it's I'm out of the game now, whatever. Like, I mean, ultimately it wasn't his decision. See, the difference between the Tonight Show and Late Night is NBC owns the Tonight Show, but Dave Letterman and the Worldwide Pants Production Company own Late Night.
Yeah.
So, NBC had the final call. And I think that was probably one of Dave's best decisions or best, business moves was like owning his own show. So,
yeah, I think so too. He has more control of it,
Right.
And I guess like you said, Johnny Carson came from another era. Maybe, it was like the professional or like the classy thing to do is to not make a public statement about it. But I kind of feel like, I guess like maybe if more people knew that he was helping Dave behind the scenes, it would have been like, oh yeah, he hates NBC because you know what I mean? Like they would have got the point.
Right.
But I mean, I didn't even know that, so I kind of feel like, I mean, just because I didn't know doesn't mean it's not true. But maybe because I didn't know it, I just kind of felt like it wasn't like a public thing, like that people knew, that he was helping out.
Yeah, it definitely was like not super well publicized.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, sure
I wonder. Yeah. Go ahead.
It seems like that's the way Johnny wanted it, and of course Dave is not going to go against what he wants. You know what I mean? He's not going to be like, oh, by the way, Johnny Carson wrote tonight's joke. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if he's going to do the same thing for Colbert. Kind of like have a little bit of. I mean, he said it's like that show. The name is owned by that company, so you kind of figure like he'll have something to do with it. But,
yeah, I know he helped. He had a lot to do with Conan O'Brien's early success. 'Cause Conan O'Brien was the the show. Shit. Oh well, he had what show? What was his called when it was on NBC? I can't remember.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't remember.
but at any rate, they were pretty much going to cancel Conan in his first couple months on air, and Dave Letterman came on his show and basically turned the ship around. Like that appearance, I guess it's credited with legitimizing Conan and like convincing them to give him a shot, and obviously the rest is history. But I wouldn't be surprised if Dave did some stuff behind the scenes for his show or to help him out, or and not that he needs help now, but just sort of to kind of I don't know, keep the tradition alive or whatever.
I think it'd be kind of funny if on Colbert's first show as late night that Dave Letterman was like the guest for the first night. Like, first show without Dave. Well, it actually does have Dave. That would be kind of funny, I think. But
yeah.
I was actually watching. You've seen Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, right?
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, that's a really good show. And I was watching. I got back into it because Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the first interview from his new season. So I watched it, and it was great. It was like two people like that went to college together that hadn't seen each other in 10 years. They're just funny and they like being around each other.
Right.
But I went back into some of the archives, and Dave Letterman was on one of those shows, and it was funny because Seinfeld went out to Connecticut where he lives to pick him up. And it was really weird because, he's not obviously filming his show at that point. It's like on a weekend or something.
Right.
And he comes out and he's not shaved.
Yeah.
He's not wearing a suit. And you're just, and you're kind of like, wow, that's Dave just, being Dave. It was a great episode. I mean, and, he was funny because, he was a comedian too. You know, I mean, he's been a comedian for his career. So, yeah, so I did a little reminiscent in that way. I was watching some of those shows. So that was pretty cool. But, yeah, it's a weird world without the late night with David Letterman. I mean, especially being it was such a big part of our formidable teen years, growing up and stuff, that he was like in my life almost, not to be like too sentimental or sappy, but he was there right in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like, I don't know. I guess that's sort of one of the few things that our generation, or maybe it's technically just before our generation, but I mean, our generation, I feel like, doesn't really have too much longevity when it comes to pop culture people or icons or anything like that. So it's like, I don't know, it is a legitimate sense of loss in a lot of ways, even though, I mean, it probably sounds like it would be melodramatic, but it does mean something.
I'll tell you the difference. It's not like anybody felt anything when like Carson Daly stopped doing Total Request Live, and now he's some joke on the Today Show, which is also a joke. I hate that show. If you watch that sometimes, like they are so like rushed for time on that show. Like if they do a segment, it's like come on, go, we're done, do the next thing.
Exactly.
It's so stupid. Like I can't stand it. And like, but you know what I mean? It's like no one cares about that. That was like what is it? TRL. I don't even know. Like 'cause it sucked. At that time, in like the early 2000s, that was like the pop culture thing. Like everybody who was like in high school got home from school and watched TRL on MTV. That was like the thing to do. And it had no longevity whatsoever. Nothing. Like that show was gone, and no one even remembers it except for weirdos like us that remember everything. But you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm like. No, there was no sense of loss. Like I'm not gonna feel bad when Carson Daly retires. Because you're right. There isn't an icon that has done this for 30 years that's going to keep doing it. Everything changes. I mean, like you said, even with Colbert, it's like his character got so boring at a point where it's like, we get it. You're making fun of Bill O'Reilly. You're not really this crazy right wing, gun nut or whatever. Like we get it, and it's done. Which I think I always like the Daily Show better because Jon Stewart is being a comedian. He's being himself on that show. And I think that's why I was interested in that more. And that's going to be the same thing when he retires at the end of the year. It's not going to be anywhere near the same without Jon Stewart. I mean, not only does he inject like the comedy, but he injects like his brains and his intelligence into his argument, and he makes a good point, whenever he's arguing something he's against. But
well, that's actually, that might be more legitimately our generation's equivalent. But I'm much more of a. I was born too late as it is, but I'm much more of a Letterman Die Hard or whatever. But Jon Stewart, in a lot of ways, has done the same thing, that someone like Dave Letterman was able to do, where um, like the show becomes the man in a way. Like there's so much of this guy in this show that like you can't conceive of it existing without him, and that's a lot of what's happening with Dave Letterman. Nobody knows how to define like the show with late night as the title without Dave Letterman. And even though Jon Stewart wasn't the first host of the Daily Show, he certainly took it to new heights, and obviously did it longer and became synonymous with it. So it's a similar phenomena.
Well, like you said, we were a little bit too late for Letterman because I didn't even start watching Letterman until he was on CBS.
Right.
So, I mean, I missed that whole. I mean, we were little kids. Like, we didn't give a crap at that point. So when we got older, we started to get interested in more things. That, oh, hey, Letterman's funny. Let's watch his show at night. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I remember because it was who was it before Jon Stewart? It was Craig Kilborn, wasn't it? I think it was Craig Kilborn.
Yeah, it was Craig Kilborn directly before him. Yeah.
Yeah, because Craig Kilborn was an ESPN anchor, and he went to the Daily Show, and then he quit and is doing whatever the hell he does now. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's definitely generationally, it's more of our thing. It was probably the Daily Show with Jon Stewart.
Right.
I think. Yeah. So, whew, good times. I'm really still mad about that top 10 book. Like, I mean, you'd think I couldn't hold a grudge for 20 years, but oh, motherfucker, you don't even know. It's not quite 20 years. It's like, what, 16 years now? Whatever.
At this point, it's got to be pushing 20, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was like 15 or 16 when we had that. So, yeah, I'm 34. So, yeah, it's almost 20. Holy crap. All right. So we've been kind of out of the loop. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with that before we move on? I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
It's not going to get any more cheerful.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always something we can revisit, too, when we see Colbert. When is Colbert's first show on that? Is that already aired? Or
No, I'm not sure the exact date. It's sometime in September.
Oh, really? So there's like a whole... Holy crap, that's like a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like a whole another year for me, man. Like, the summer... It really is, because, like, with the kids being out of school, it's like, oh, when school start again?
Right.
Mainly it's because you got to pay for babysitters all summer, which sucks, but whatever. Speaking of things that don't suck, or hopefully they won't suck, I mean, we've been kind of out of the loop. Well, we haven't been out of the loop, but we have not done a show in 2 months. And, I mean, do you realize how many Star Wars things happened in, like, that 2-month period that we haven't been doing a podcast? Like, holy crap. It's like that. The freaking internet blew up over like the course of a couple of days with some stuff. I was just going to go through the list real quick of what I was going to bring up, and then we can talk about them individually if you'd like. Well, the first thing that happened was they had that Star Wars celebration in Anaheim that they do every year. And, of course, this year there was a lot more to talk about because the new movie's coming out in December. And, of course, they released the second teaser trailer for the Star Wars movie.
Right.
Also, at that Star Wars celebration, they released the name and the plot details of the first standalone Star Wars movie, which is going to be called Rogue One. Also, they announced that there's going to be a Star Wars video game called Battlefront that comes out, which is awesome because they did Battlefront 1 and 2 on original Xbox PS2, and those games were awesome, and they were supposed to do a Battlefront 3, and it never happened. So now that like the licensings have changed and things have been changing, they're going to do a Battlefront game on the next generation systems, Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and it looks amazing from what I've seen so far. I do have a couple. Yeah, I do have a couple of gripes about it, but we'll talk about it in more detail. Also, Vanity Fair, I don't know if you saw, did a photo shoot, and they revealed some more details about the characters and stuff that were going on, and some behind-the-scenes stuff, which is pretty interesting. And also, I've been watching the Clone Wars cartoon on Netflix. I'm continually watching that. I'm about halfway done through season 3. So, yeah, that's what's been going on. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I guess, like, the big thing, we'll kind of work backwards. I'll start with the video game. It looks amazing, like we said already. There's a couple weird things about it that I don't like. They're not going to have, like, a campaign mode, so you can't, like, play through, like, a story. It's basically all online multiplayer battles. So that's kind of like I kind of wanted like a little bit of a storyline, whether it
Yeah.
be something that's going to tie into the movie or if it's just something parallel to like the original trilogies. But that's the good thing is they're using only like original trilogy vehicles and characters. Like the prequels have nothing to do with this game, which yeah, that's like a win. That's a win-win for everybody,
right.
you know. And the other thing they're not going to have is like space battles because in Battlefront 2 you could like if your ship moved into the system and there was another ship, you'd have a space battle first. So you'd have to get into some kind of fighter craft and like dogfight with other fighters and then like attack the ship and knock its shields out and do stuff like you normally do in a space battle game.
Right.
So yeah, there's a couple of things that kind of but like I saw the trailer that they showed during that Star Wars celebration and it looks pretty freaking sweet. Like I mean, just like the sound effects, like the graphics. I mean, the next gen console, we've had an Xbox One now for about a month. We finally broke down and bought one.
Oh, wow.
It is pretty nice, by the way. But yeah, so that's coming out. Looks pretty exciting. Have you like played any of the other games or anything like that? Or
I've pretty much
play them?
I have almost nothing to do with video games anymore now. My last, most recent experience with a new game was Grand Theft Auto 5, and that's already probably a year old at least by now.
Yeah, it's been out for a little bit, but yeah. Well, basically, like the whole point of the game is like you're supposed to. I'm not sure how they're doing it this time around, but like the old games, you would like play like a certain time period. So you'd be like in the original trilogy era or like the prequel trilogy era, and you'd like pick a side. So you'd be like the rebels or like the Republic or the Separatists or the Empire, and you basically just go from system to system, and you had to like capture all the star systems basically. But what you do is you have like this massive ground battle where you like were a character and you'd run around like shooting the other characters. It was actually a third person shooter because you could see over the shoulder, and basically whoever racked up the most kills would win. And so like you'd have to like dwindle down their army. And you could pick up like power up bonuses, like you could have an extra set of reinforcements. So when you got to a certain level, you'd get 20 extra guys on your side or whatever. You could pick to play like, oh, you can use your hero in this battle, so you could play like as Yoda or like Darth Vader, and you could go around the battlefield as a Jedi or whatever. So it was pretty neat. It was just like a massive ground battle game, and then the second one introduced like the space battles, like I was talking about. So you do space battle first, and then you go to the ground battle. Usually you had to win like 2 out of 3 matches to capture the planet. And then once you capture the planet, you could get more bonuses. You could like go through that system to go to other systems, blah, blah, blah. So it was a pretty neat game. It was a good concept for like the Star Wars universe because you hadn't really seen anything like that yet for Star Wars, Most of the good games were on PC, whether it had been like those X-Wing games that we talked about before or like Dark Forces or something. So it's actually a pretty big deal that it's coming out, that they're finally making it. Because like when they scrapped LucasArts, they actually scrapped a game called Star Wars 1313 or something, which is you're supposed to play like as Boba Fett in Coruscant or something and be like a bounty hunter and do stuff. But they scrapped the game, so everyone was kind of disappointed because they started releasing like screenshots of it and stuff, like what they were working on. And then when they took over the company, it was like, okay, LucasArts is bye-bye, and they just stopped. They laid off all those people and they stopped making it. So it's actually, I mean, it sucks for them that they got screwed like that, but it's pretty exciting that their next video game for Star Wars is going to be in the Battlefront series. So that was a pretty awesome announcement, and really looking forward to it. And of course, it comes out in November, and if you pre-order it, you can get the planet Jakku or whatever it's called a week before everybody else does, which was another thing that was revealed in the teaser trailer, which we'll get to later. So really excited about that. So the Vanity Fair spread. Did you actually see the pictures for that, or you hear anything about it?
Actually, I heard about it a while ago, but CVS across the street happens to still have some copies, and I just looked at it like 2 days ago. So yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts right off the top of your head, or?
I mean, it's obviously well done. It's a weird, in a way, I guess it's a weird venue or vehicle to turn to for Star Wars information or whatever, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much in a lot of ways viewed as a pessimist. I try to be real, keep it real or whatever, for lack of a better term, as much as possible about everything, especially the stuff I actually love. like I guess I hold them to an even higher standard than all the other bullshit in the world. But I have to say that so far, every little piece of information or plot detail or whatever it is, like a look at the costumes, etc., that I see for this new Star Wars movie, it's actually making me want to see it more. So they're on the right track.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing because it kind of ties into the new teaser trailer too. Because like when we saw the first one, we were kind of like, that's it, that's all we get. But with the second one, it's a little bit more like, okay, this is actually kind of getting me excited, but like not in a skeptical way. Like, oh, I got to see this, see what I mean. Like, this actually looks like it might be good,
right.
And I think with the photo shoot, I mean, a couple of those things we've already seen. Like, we already saw like Oscar Isaac's character in the trailer, so we knew what he did. I guess the big reveals from the photo spread that were, yes, finally Adam Driver definitely is, the bad guy, Kylo Ren. On top of that, there was who's the other person? Oh, Gwendolyn Christie from Game of Thrones is like that chrome-looking stormtrooper, Captain Phasma or something like that. So that was a reveal that that's her character. Also, Lupita Nyong'o is going to be actually a CGI character. And her name's Maz Kanata. She's like a pirate or something like that. So that was actually the big like information that was released. Like you finally knew what her character was going to be. I actually thought they were going to make her like a Jedi or something like that. So a little surprised about that. But yeah, that was pretty cool because they showed her in like the motion capture suit and stuff like that.
All the little
so that was
dots
cool.
on her face or something.
Yeah, so I guess she's supposed to be like a pirate. I'm assuming along the lines of, a gangster like Jabba the Hutt or something, because in the photo spread you see all these like aliens like hanging out at her place or whatever, so she's probably going to be some sort of character like that. But I'm assuming they're probably going to need her help for something, which is why she's in it. So, there's that dynamic. There's that dynamic, I guess. There's a lot of reveal. And they also showed a picture later on the Star Wars website of Andy Serkis in the same getup, like with the dots on his face. So his character is supposed to be CGI too. I guess his name is supposed to be like Supreme Leader Snoke or something like that. So he's some kind of crazy, weird bad guy. But yeah, that's really what that Vanity Fair thing did. It was pretty cool. J.J. Abrams did make a joke that he was showing the writer of the article some scene where like a speeder's going through the desert or something like that. And he stopped it and he used like one of those like little computer pens and was like, did a circle in the sand. And he's like, right here, I'm going to put the bones of Jar Jar Binks, to like essentially kill the character off. And I'm like, yeah, you're funny and you know what we like. So,
yeah.
So I mean, I think that gave me a little bit of hope too, because like he doesn't like Jar Jar Binks either. And, there was a lot of other things that were talked about, like how I guess George Lucas, who declined an invitation for an interview for that article. Of course he did. I guess like he had written some ideas about what he wanted to see in the new trilogy, and they pretty much threw him away.
Good.
So that was kind of like, we're done with you being involved with this now, so we're just going to do what we want to do. And they were talking about how they had to start from like square one, because I guess they fired that Michael Arndt screenwriter, because when they went in there, he was basically just had stuff like on like outlines and things, but there was no script, and they're like, you really need to start writing this. And I guess like he wanted to focus more on the younger characters, but they wanted to actually have a lot of the old characters. So there was a bunch of crap going on. So I think from what you've seen so far, they're doing it right. I think, at least from what we've seen, a lot of practical effects. Hopefully it'll capture that again. So
yeah, I was actually excited. Excited probably most in that article by that picture of all the the rogues gallery of assorted alien characters, sort of cross between, the feel of it anyway was sort of a cross between the original Mos Eisley Cantina and I guess
or like
Jabba Palace stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it was like, it's not like a bunch of CGI characters. Right. It was people in makeup, in costumes. It was like, it was real. It's like real people. You can tell. CGI is great sometimes, but when it comes to like characters or people, you can tell when something's computer generated as opposed to when it's a real person. And I think even with the motion capture, which they're doing for a couple of the characters, which is fine. It looks like mostly it's people in makeup and costumes.
Yeah.
So
Well,
That's always cool. And I guess like that the droid that rolls too, like really does that.
yeah, I saw
Like they
some stuff
made
about
some kind of
that. Yeah,
technology. Yeah. So I mean that's pretty awesome. That's not even computers. That's like him really doing it.
like
So wow.
it's like I mean, I don't know. It sort of begs the question, like, is it awesome that they can do something practically like that if it still looks like CGI on film? Like I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, it's awesome that they figured out how to make that robot function like that. Sort of rolling against itself, I guess. Um, but I when I first saw that, I would have fucking bet my whole life savings, which isn't much, but anyway, I would have bet it all that that was CGI. Um,
Yeah.
I guess it remains to be seen. But yeah, obviously, I applaud any effort being made to do things, in a way that leans toward old fashioned a little more than current movie making has been. Um, I guess my whole being a realist thing is causing me to sort of frame it like this. It seems that the way it's being marketed and the way the information about it is being parceled out to us is all very, attractive to people like us, and I think the vast majority of the Star Wars fandom who, they're kind of saying and all the things we want them to say and showing the things we
Mm-hmm.
want to see. Um, but obviously, is it just marketing or is it legit? And only time will tell. And I'm really, really hoping. I really want to buy into the fact that it's going to be, everything I hope. And it looks pretty good so far.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, from our standpoint, I don't really necessarily want to know what the story is going to be. I mean, I
Right.
do a little bit, but not really. Like, I want to be surprised, but I kind of feel like I just want to be reassured that like you're doing things the right way. You're filming a scene like this. This character is going to be in it. I want to know those things, but I don't want to know the story. I just want to be reassured, and I
For
think
sure.
I mean, that's the biggest thing, for me.
Yeah.
And like you said, hopefully it's not just like it's marketing BS. Hopefully it really does pan out. But I mean, seeing the new teaser trailer, it does look like it's going to be pretty sweet. I mean, just based on like the few snippets of scenes that we've seen, and of course the biggest reveal out of the new trailer was seeing Han Solo and Chewie at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And he said they're in the Falcon and they say oh Chewie, we're home, and it's kind of like, well, where were you? Like, have you not been flying around the Millennium Falcon? What's going on? You have more questions. More questions. So
yeah.
that was pretty neat.
That was, that of course that accomplished that one little piece snippet of them at the end accomplished, everything they wanted it to. It was perfectly placed. It was the perfect setting of the hook in all of our collective mouths. Like, uh, I mean, it worked. Like, who didn't get nerd chills when they saw that?
Yeah,
Instantly.
I totally got goosebumps.
Like,
Yeah.
it's yeah, absolutely. Even talking about it right now, I'm getting it. So it's super effective. I will say that from the very first teaser they put out to the second one, my interest shot up exponentially, and my positive feelings about it shot up exponentially. The first one was just sort of, I don't know, I think it was just too little and too I don't know, too foreign, I guess, to me to really
Yeah.
get excited. At that point, it still seemed like, okay, it's still going to be like a modern Hollywood stupid version of it or whatever. But when I saw the second one, it was like, okay, I want to see this movie. So I mean, good
Yeah.
on them, congrats to them.
Definitely. I thought it was pretty cool at that one scene where like the TIE fighters like leaving the hangar and it's like shooting up the place and you see
Yeah.
that like one little stormtrooper guy go like flying in the air. I mean it's like a 2 second spot, but you see the stormtrooper guy flying. I was like, wait, did I just see that? And I like rewound it and then like paused it and he's like in midair, like ah. So I'm thinking that's that John Boyega's character like escaping wherever he's from in a TIE fighter and he's like shooting the place up as he goes and he leaves. So I'm thinking that's like in the beginning probably, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of a lot of that teaser definitely got me into it more. And there's like that extended clip at the end where like the TIE fighter is chasing the Millennium Falcon through that like
Right.
that engine block or whatever. That was pretty awesome. So
Who doesn't
yeah, I mean, so far, but
who doesn't think of the end battle in Return of the Jedi when in that part, in that scene. like where
Oh
they're
yeah, where they go
intricately
through the
weaving
tubes.
through the inner structure, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Return of the Jedi, there's a rumor that Warwick Davis is going to be in it as Wicket the Ewok again, and I guess like there's a scene that they leaked on some site from something that I can't remember. There's a possibility there's a scene where the Empire goes back to Endor to get. Well, it's actually not called the Empire anymore. If you haven't heard that, they changed it to the Resistance for the Rebellion, and then the First Order or something. So, I mean, I'm kind of a little weary about that too, because I kind of felt like if I was going to come into the story, I would say by now they should be the New Republic, not still like the Resistance or the Rebellion. You know, so I'm kind of wondering about that, like what's been going on. You know, and that's part of that whole Road to the Force Awakens marketing ploy they're going to do with that book that comes out in September called Aftermath. So I got to read that and find out. But speaking of that too, they're going to have a mobile gaming app come out that takes place right after the end of the Return of the Jedi. I guess like you can be like a smuggler or a bounty hunter in the sector where like Hoth and Cloud City are from Empire Strikes Back. Like you'll be in that part of the world or something. But anyway, like I was saying, so Warwick Davis might be Wicket because as you know in the teaser trailer, you see that charred mask of Darth Vader. So someone retrieves it. So they think the new Empire goes back to retrieve it. And I guess like they mess up some Ewoks while they're there. So I guess like Wicket leaves the planet with like some of the Resistance, and I guess you see him with like Princess Leia at some point for some reason. Like he tells them what happened or something. So somehow he figured out how to fly a spaceship. I don't know, but that's the rumor. Because like they couldn't do that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not an Ewok hater, like so many people are. So I'm all for that if they do it the right way. If it doesn't like seem shoehorned in there. I really don't like, the terminology changing. Obviously, they're gonna. I'd imagine anyway, they're gonna endeavor to make that make sense within the new story and everything. But like. Isn't it? I mean, to me, it seems like splitting hairs between rebellion and resistance. I mean, is it really necessary? I don't know. It just at this point, knowing the little bit that I know, it just feels like something like that is them trying too hard to say no. This is our version of it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I hope it's not the case.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of wondering if the terminology is just from one perspective. Like maybe, like Leia and them think of themselves as the Republic, but like maybe the remnant of the Empire thinks that they're just the Resistance and we're the First Order and they're just in our way, kind of thing. Maybe it's from their perspective that they're calling them that. So I mean, maybe I don't think they all sat down like even in like this fictitious world and we're like, okay, well now that your Emperor's dead. We're going to call ourselves the Resistance, and you can call yourself whatever you want. They didn't like have like a parlay and change their name. So I'm assuming that probably, like on the bad guy side of things, they renamed it. Like, they're not the Rebellion anymore. Now they're the Resistance because, hey, they just destroyed our two biggest leaders, and there is something not to be trifled with, but we're going to beat them. You know what I mean? So I kind of feel like maybe that's just a perspective that they're giving it. Like who knows? Maybe Leia. I would think that at this point, Princess Leia is like running around the galaxy trying to get star systems to come back to the Republic and, reassure them that like the Emperor's dead, like who knows what kind of propaganda they put out in like those 20, 30 years that they were ruling the galaxy, maybe that's what I figured would be happening,
Well, I guess that's the point. Like, there's a lot of blank to fill in, like it seems like it's come all the way back around to, like, what do these people have to resist against? Obviously, there's like another empire-type organization. Like, we've come full circle. But what happened in between? When we last left these people, they had won, and presumably they were in control of everything. So, there's still a lot of like I would imagine kind of ground to cover in between Return of the Jedi and this one.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that book. Like I've said numerous times before, to see what the official fill-in is going to be. But see, that's the thing. I don't think the book is going to cover 30 years. I think it just happens in like maybe like a year or two after Return of the Jedi to say, well, here's how this whole thing got started, and now 30 years later, here we are. And like I said, it's a huge multimedia project. That's true. So that's going to have like comic books have something to do with it. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that, and like I guess that show Rebels is starting to fill in some blanks too. Like they said, somehow that show is going to tie into the trilogy, so maybe they just scrap that, or I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But the 2 hour premiere of that starts in like a couple weeks, and I guess Darth Vader is going to be a big part of this season. Like he's had enough, I guess, of what's been going on. I guess like some of the clones from the Clone Wars come back too. Like they've gotten old, and they're kind of hiding out on some planet, and they don't like what's going on. Because one of the main characters, which I'll get into in a minute, about the Clone Wars cartoon, was some of the clone commanders have like names, and like they're actually, like in the movie, Clone Commander Cody was like Ben Kenobi's like right hand clone. Like he's the guy that he worked with. And I guess in the show, there's a clone called Clone Commander Rex, and he's like works with Anakin Skywalker a lot. So Clone Commander Rex is going to be in Rebels, but of course, it's like 20 years later, he's an old clone who's kind of fat. And he somehow starts to help the rebellion because I guess they don't really agree with everything that's been happening. So, interesting. So, like I said, I've been watching this Clone Wars cartoon, and what's the old saying go? You can't polish a turd. Does that make sense?
Polish a turd, put lipstick on a pig, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. That's kind of how I feel about it because, but I think with what they were given as their material to work with, I think they've done like a really good job with it so far. It kind of I didn't like that Ahsoka Tano character at first, like that young Padawan of Anakin Skywalker. But she's kind of grown on me a little bit. She kind of reminds me of like the Qui-Gon Jinn character, kind of like against the grain a little bit, not necessarily agreeing with what everybody says, not quite as like rebellious as he was in the Phantom Menace, but like I'm kind of like the character's kind of grown on me. She's not too bad. One of the big things I like about it is I like the portrayal of Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars cartoon because if you remember in A New Hope, when Ben's talking to Luke, he's like, he was the best star pilot in the galaxy. He was a cunning warrior, and he was a good friend. And they kind of portray him as those things that he said he was. He's a really good pilot. He uses like his brain and comes up with weird schemes on how to win battles. And he really is like a really good friend to Obi-Wan. Like they do a lot of stuff together. They're basically friends. Like they have that mentor-student relationship, but you kind of get the hint that they enjoy their company. So I think handling the character from that standpoint, being taking away the travesty that was the Jake Lloyd / Hayden Christensen portrayal of the character. This cartoon is doing a better job, I think, of showing you how Anakin Skywalker was like this great person, and then obviously we know he becomes bad and everything. Interesting fact, I was reading some interview with George. I've been doing a lot of reading about this. It's almost like near obsessive levels.
Right.
But I guess like the Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker were separate characters at one point while he was writing the first movie. But somehow they like blended together, like whatever. So
I mean, I'd heard that too before, yeah.
Yeah, because like I guess like even like Senator or even Palpatine and the Emperor were separate people too. And the Emperor wasn't really like that bad. It was just like he was manipulated or something. But then he put those two characters together and was like, well, he's doing the manipulator and he's going to be the Emperor. Because the scope of what he originally wrote was way too big to even take place over 9 movies. Like he originally wanted to do. So like a lot of stuff he didn't even make Darth Vader Luke's father until they were like filming The Empire Strikes Back or like right before it. So that was never like in the backstory. But anyway, I think this cartoon is doing a really good job, and you're getting the perspective of like all these other Jedi, and it's not terrible. Like you saw like how in the prequels, like they made like all these characters, and they were just like kind of in the background. You didn't really hear from them a lot. Like some of these Jedi are getting like their own episode arcs of like 2 or 3 episodes, and you're seeing like what they do and who they are. And I think it's cool because like the mystique of like the original trilogy is that there's only really like 1 or 2 Jedi in that, and then in the prequel there's like hundreds of thousands of them or whatever, and it's like that's kind of weird because like he talks about how Jedi Knights used to serve the Republic and they were systematically destroyed. So it's kind of neat to see like their individual stories, but then of course the whole time in the back of my mind, like, he's gonna die. Yeah, he's gonna die. Yeah, that guy, he's dead. He's gonna. So it's kind of like it kind of ruins it a little bit. But like I said, what they were given to work with for story, they're doing pretty good. So. Yep, that's what I have to say about that. So.
I guess it's probably my own fault for maybe perceiving the concept wrong, but I always kind of, before like we had the prequels to sort of show us what this stuff was supposed to be, I sort of, envisioned the Jedi, I guess, order, for lack of a better word. Even though I kind of hate that, but whatever. I envision it as maybe like a group of 20 or 30. Like, I never really pictured, multitudes of Jedi. I don't know. To me, it's sort of like diminishes their specialness in a way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But then, you call them knights. I mean, that kind of implies that there has to be a bunch of them at one point. I don't know. I think the first trilogy does such a good job of, applying this whole like mystique to the word Jedi and like the concept of it, that like, I don't know, if they're not, almost anything that they could have done would have been a disappointment after that, I think, because like, everybody filled in the blank themselves in a way, and I don't know, especially around the time of, I forget if it was the second prequel or the third, where they showed Order 66 or whatever it was, and like they all started getting killed. Do you remember which one was that? The third one?
That was the third one, yeah.
Yeah. And like a lot of them are like getting shot in the back and stuff like that, and it's like, I don't know, a lot of them just went out way too easily, it seems. So it sort of waters down the whole mystique.
Yeah, it does. Well, like what you were saying, I think the scope of the whole story got away from him too, because at first, like, you see, okay, when you look at the original trilogy, how many different planets do you actually see? You see Tatooine, you see Alderaan for a minute before it gets blown up, and then that's it. And then, well, Yavin 4, but I guess that's like a moon. So there's like 2 or 3 planets in that. In Empire Strikes Back, you see Hoth, and you see Cloud City and Dagobah. And then the last one, you see Tatooine again, and you see Endor. So you don't really see, you see like 7 total planets.
Right.
But then when they get into the prequel, they start talking about how that galaxy has thousands of star systems with planets in it. So now you're like, well, that's stupid, because like, where the hell does that exist? I mean, I get that it's fantasy and sci-fi, but like, come on. So you're telling me that like this Senate has like 10,000 senators in it? Like, that's stupid.
You're right.
So now you're saying, to go along with the Jedi Knights were guardians of peace and justice, there has to be thousands of them.
Exactly.
Because there's thousands of planets.
That's true.
So now you're like, well, shit, how do we get rid of them all? Well, let's just make them really dumb and get shot in the back. So it's like, that doesn't make sense, because they're Jedi. They should know. Like, you saw like what happened when they tried to kill Yoda. He was kind of like, something's afoot, and he like jumps up and kills the guy.
Yeah. And
then Chewie's like, let's get out of here. But all the other Jedi are like, come on, let's go. And they're just like, hey, why are you shooting at me? Aw, And then like the one girl's not even looking. She gets wasted. Right. The guy flying the Jedi fighter, like, you'd think that like he would use some kind of Jedi reflex or something to get out of the way. They just shoot him down. Obi-Wan only lived because they missed him. And it's like, well, that's not really cool.
Well,
so yeah, the whole thing was watered down.
It's crazy too that within the same trilogy and often in the same movie, they establish all these new kind of additional crazy powers that the Jedi have that you didn't really see before in the original. So like they build them up to be even like more powerful or resourceful or whatever than we initially thought. And then in the same fucking sentence, practically, they show them to be completely stupid, weak, and vulnerable. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, like, I'll point to 2 instances in Revenge of the Sith where that happened. One, when Anakin, one fallen Jedi, who I guess you could call a Sith at this point, walks up to the Jedi Temple with, like, clone troopers behind him, and they systematically destroy every Jedi in the temple. Right. You figure that, like, 30 Jedi could like band together and just like kind of form a force field or something and just stop that from happening. No, they're like, a bunch of troopers just start shooting at him. They're like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? I'm dead. What do I do? What do I do? I'm dead. And then he goes and kills a bunch of kids. Yeah. And you're like, what? And then the other thing, when they go to arrest the Emperor, there's 4 Jedi Knights that go there. Well, actually, they're all considered masters, I guess, that walk into this room. And then the Emperor goes, are you threatening me? Oh, you're dead, let's fight, Mace Windu. It's like, but he just killed 3 Jedi Masters like they were nothing. Like, I get that the Sith are powerful and they only need 2 of them or whatever, but you can't tell me that 4 like really powerful Jedi masters just get their ass handed to him like that. You know what I mean? Come on. And then like
Exactly.
freaking Mace Windu would have killed the Emperor if it wasn't for Anakin. You know what I mean? So it's like, how come those three were a bunch of chumps, but Samuel motherfucking Jackson
Right.
can like do that? It's just like,
Yeah, but then he got his ass handed to him epically eventually too.
yeah,
Like I don't know. Yeah, they did a lot of really confusing,
yep.
build up and tear down and yeah,
Well, they had to,
yeah, yeah.
And the story, the original, like you said, the mystique of it, where it said, he says a young pupil of mine named Darth Vader betrayed and murdered your father. Like, at that point, like I was saying, Lucas already established that Anakin and Darth Vader were going to be separate people. So Anakin was Obi-Wan's Jedi friend that got killed by a apprentice of his that like turned to the dark side. And of course, they fit it in how they fit it in by saying, well, in a sense, he killed your father because he ceased to become your father and became this evil person.
Right.
I mean, that kind of made sense. That was fine.
Could buy that.
So if you, like you were saying, if there were only like 30, I would, even if there were like just 100 Jedi Knights, and Darth Vader and the Emperor went after them one at a time, or maybe two or three at a time, you could see him systematically going through the Jedi Order and wiping them out.
Right.
But now, like you said, with the hundreds of them that are left, like they're all a bunch of chumps because they get shot in the back. And then one can make the logical assumption that so many of them, how could all of them have died?
Right.
Some of them had to survive. So like, well, where the hell were they in the original trilogy? You know what I mean? Like, were they still hiding and like shitting their pants because they were scared? Like it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I think when he went to the prequels and started doing all this stuff, it's like, oh crap, well now I got to make like thousands of Jedi to protect thousands of systems, and it's like, well, you just screwed it.
Ultimately, I think my takeaway from all of Star Wars is if you look at like the original trilogy, especially the very first one, people, it allowed everybody to view George Lucas as this like master storyteller, this really like great craftsman almost of like this new mythology or whatever. It seemed like it had just the right amount of scope, but combined with restraint at the same time. Like it was a perfect balance kind of thing. Yep. But the more like, if you read into a lot of the stuff he said during the time they were making like the special editions and especially the prequels, it becomes apparent that the best asset, the best filmmaking tool George Lucas ever had was limited budget.
Yep.
Like because if you look at what he did on a shoestring budget versus what he did with an unlimited budget.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of reveals George Lucas and all his weaknesses for what they really are.
Yep.
I don't know. It's really. That's why I don't blame anybody. Like you said, he had some ideas he wanted to see or whatever in the new ones, and they just sort of like, yeah, we'll get right on that. Like, how can you blame anybody for doing that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, you're right. It's difficult, and well, I think I'll come full circle with this conversation. We're talking about comedians. I think Patton Oswalt said it best. Did you hear that bit he did where he said if he could go back in time to change one thing, he would kill George Lucas before he made the prequels or something like that? Because basically his point, though.
No, but it makes sense.
Yeah, well, he made. I mean, he was funny,
right?
Because he was like doing a George Lucas impersonation and stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, so you like Darth Vader?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "He's gonna be in the new one." He's like, "Well, sort of. He's gonna be a kid," and he's like, "Oh." So basically, his point was he doesn't care where the things he likes came from. Right. He just likes the things he likes, so he didn't care about the origins of the whole thing. Like, he didn't have to see it. Like, it was already kind of like told to you sort of in the story. He doesn't care, and that's kind of like how I feel about it too. It's like, I mean, like I told you numerous times before, if you, without me seeing the prequel trilogy, if you sat me in a room and told me the plot points and the premise of what was going to happen to lead up to the Empire, it was actually a pretty decent story.
Right.
It just failed in the execution of it, and
right.
the scope was too big, and that's really what it came down.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, the scope. You're absolutely right about the scope being too big because, like, once you start adding in, like you said, thousands of fucking star systems or whatever, and thousands of Jedi and thousands of troopers and this and that, the human brain can't even conceive of it anymore. Like, in the original trilogy, we were allowed to sort of like contain it all in our own little private like movie theater in our head kind of thing. and like I can't even begin to comprehend like it looks like you're watching a video game half the time with those prequel trilogy movies.
Yep. That's what we were talking about too. We didn't want the new ones to look like video games with all like the fake
Right.
ships flying around. It's
But
like,
to add to what you said about the Patton Oswalt thing, I agree with him. Like, I don't really necessarily need to see where it comes from. But furthermore, I think seeing Darth Vader as a child weakens Darth Vader.
yeah,
I mean, children are weak by default. They're not fully formed people yet. They're kind of naive and defenseless in a lot of ways and vulnerable. And obviously, those qualities go into making Anakin Skywalker, become Darth Vader. But knowing that's enough, like if you see like, oh, this kid is Darth Vader or whatever, like it takes away from the mystique and the power of the visual, the image of Darth Vader.
yeah.
And so on and so on, just like with the Jedi and everything.
Well, I think would have worked better if you wanted to show like Darth Vader as a kid. You could have done like a 5-minute flashback sequence in like one of the original movies and said like, okay, well, why is he so bad? Like, why does he hate himself? It's like, well, when he was a kid, he was too old and had an emotional attachment to his mom. So they show like a little scene where he's sad about his mom, and then she dies and she never sees her again. And then you could be like, well, that can't be it. It's like, well, obviously he had kids with somebody. So what happened to the lady he had kids with? Oh, well, the Emperor tricked him into thinking that he could save her, but he actually killed her, and that's what he told him. And so he led him to believe that he accidentally killed his wife. Right. So now he's pissed off that the Emperor couldn't come through with what he promised. And you kind of can see in like The Empire Strikes Back where he's like, hey, why don't you join me? We'll beat the Emperor. We'll rule the galaxy. Like, I hate the Emperor. Hint, hint, spoiler alert. Right. I'm going to kill him in the next movie. Like, I mean, you get the sense that he doesn't like the Emperor. And, like, you could expound on that a little bit through, like, flashback sequences, not 3 shitty movies.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, give me a break. Like, and like you said, when I remember the first time we watched Revenge of the Sith, like, 10 years ago, you said specifically that when he quote unquote turned to the dark side, it was way too fast and easy.
Right.
It's like, oh man, what did I do? Well, you're my master now. You're like, that's all it took.
Yeah, he just gives up.
You loser. He just gave up. Like,
yep, I'll do what you say or whatever. Yeah, it was so awkward. And part of that sure is the fault of Hayden Christensen's acting ability, but I think more of it is the fault of really bad storytelling / directing / execution of concept, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I was reading an article or an interview Natalie Portman did about how those movies almost ruined her career. And, I honestly, like, when I look at, like, Natalie Portman's performance in those movies, like, I didn't think she was, like, a bad actor by any stretch of the imagination.
I think, if anybody, she came out the best out of those movies, honestly.
Yeah, well, her and maybe, like, throwaway Liam Neeson character was great, but he's only in one movie.
Right.
But yeah, and, honestly, I don't think Ewan McGregor did that bad as Obi-Wan.
No, I don't think so either. But
it was a little short. Well, there's a rumor they're going to sign him to do another movie or trilogy of movies showing what happened between 3 and 4, like when he's watching over Luke. So, I mean, if they do that right, that would be a good idea. But I think, like, I wouldn't say that, like, Natalie Portman's performance was bad, but like the movies were bad, and she was stuck to those movies as that character, and it's like, where did this character even come from? It's not her fault. It's, like you said, it's bad writing.
Yeah, in my opinion, at least I don't know, maybe it's just my perspective or whatever, but I feel like, I forget she's even in those movies half the time. Like, I don't associate her with those movies in any way as like.
Yeah, not anymore.
Like, oh my god, like Natalie Portman, what's the next thing that pops in my brain? It's not Star Wars. I mean, maybe it is on the grand scheme of her career just because she was in 3 of them and they were so high profile, but I don't know. I think she's overreacting with that.
Yeah.
I know Ewan McGregor has a particular disdain for the diehard Star Wars fans.
Yeah. You chumps are crazy.
Yeah. So I know he's a little sour on the experience specifically because of that, but I mean, sure, those are probably the highest profile thing he ever did too.
Yeah, he was kind of he was in Train Spotting, right? Was
yeah.
That the movie he was in? So yeah, he was in a lot of like those indie British flicks, and then he had like a role in that movie Black Hawk Down, like he was like a journalist or something like that. But yeah, I don't really remember seeing him in a lot of stuff. Like I knew kind of the name a little bit, but yeah.
I don't necessarily feel like I don't know. I don't typecast him in my brain with that though either. Like I don't
No, I don't either.
like
Yeah, you're
oh
right.
he's
I don't.
only Obi-Wan or whatever.
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't
I don't
do
know.
that either. I don't really typecast any of those people. I mean, I think that's why it always worked for some
Right.
reason. But like, I mean, Harrison Ford's done way more things than Han Solo.
Right.
Even though you couldn't imagine anybody else playing that role, it's not like he's Han Solo. I mean, he's done Indiana Jones. He's done tons of standalone movies where he wasn't some kind of like weird iconic character. He
Yeah.
just played a guy. So
Well,
I don't know. Yeah, I think the writing. But yeah, go ahead.
I think it's safe to say that the 32 years in between playing Han Solo, the last time and this time, kind of helped to distance people's perception of that as well.
Yeah,
But
totally.
I mean, it's weird. Like you're right. Like I don't know. I don't see Han Solo as taking over who Harrison Ford is. Um, Yet with somebody like Stallone, who's also done a billion standalone movies and had huge chunks of time between playing iconic roles from movie to movie, he will never escape being Rocky and Rambo.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's
Yeah,
interesting.
well, I think a lot of it too is like Stallone was kind of like Schwarzenegger. He couldn't take a movie that wasn't like an action movie. Like it's almost like he couldn't get a job doing anything else once he
Right.
started doing it. So I kind of feel like when you look at people like him, you look at I look at Schwarzenegger as either like the Terminator, like that's like one of his iconic roles, or maybe like Harry Tasker in True Lies. But like that's the same thing. Like he didn't really have a wide range of movies that he played in. Harrison Ford could do a movie that wasn't an action movie, but then he'd do an action movie, but then he would do one that wasn't. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he did a lot of stuff. So I think he just was as an actor, the scope of his work was more complete, I would think, than like Stallone. But I know what you're saying though. Like as much as like you see Stallone in like the Expendables and whatever other movie, he's always gonna be Rocky. Like
Yeah.
there's no getting around it.
Well, I think Stallone and Schwarzenegger have such specific, looks and
Yeah.
and speaking styles and everything else that kind of works against them. Harrison
Yeah.
Ford is a little more all-American, good-looking guy, more versatile kind of.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Stallone is a really good dramatic actor.
Yep.
And I think Schwarzenegger is actually really good at comedy.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, tend to forget about both of those sides of them, but I mean,
Kindergarten Cop, man.
yeah, it's great.
Watch that on TV.
Great. I mean, you got twins, you got Junior. Like he had
Actually, Junior was on too. Yeah.
he had quite a streak there where he was just kind of doing comedies, and I don't know. They were all
that's
entertaining.
why. Well, that's why I kind of like True Lies, because that was like an action comedy.
Yeah,
Like, there was a
exactly.
lot of funny parts in that, and I mean a lot of it was Tom Arnold, but it's one of those things.
Even Last Action Hero is underrated. I mean, it's very like tongue in cheek. It's very self aware. Like
That's one of my. There's like two of my favorite monologues in all movies are in that movie. Like the one where he's like, wow. He's like, you know how easy you just made like 30 years of police work look? He's like, all they had to do was drive around the neighborhood and point at the house and say, look, the bad guy's in there. Like that was a pretty good line. And then he was like, he goes up to the door. He's like, hi, can I speak to the drug dealer or whatever? And then the other part where he goes into like real life. And he says something like he's going off on a rant, and then he looks at the kid and he's like, "Rubber baby buggy bumpers." He's like, "Ha! You bet you didn't know I was gonna say that, did you?" And then he like ran away or something, and he was like, "What?" I love that movie. It's so stupid, but that's why it worked.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it was probably ahead of its time, but yeah, it's a really good idea.
Yep. And who doesn't want to go into a movie and like be a character in that world,
Right.
and like live it out? Like how many times as a kid have I fantasized about being a Jedi or like flying the X-wing? Like I could be in that world and do those cool things,
Right.
But here we are, grounded in reality and crappy jobs and everything. One thing, real quick, last Star Wars thing, they did release the plot and the name of the standalone film called Rogue One. And the plot apparently is going to be the rebels stealing the Death Star plans. So that's going to be pretty cool.
Nice.
Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I didn't.
No, I didn't
they didn't
hear
really.
that.
They didn't really show a whole lot. It was just like a teaser. But
I hadn't heard
You
that
guys-
before now, but that's on the surface it sounds like it's a little thin to build an entire movie around, but not really. I mean, that's another important piece of like original trilogy
or yeah,
canon or whatever that like people never got to really have explained. That I think it also hasn't been like attempted and botched like the prequel stuff. So
right.
like yeah, that's kind of exciting to me.
Yeah, it does. I thought it was a good idea, and I guess like the rumors were they were going to do like a Boba Fett movie or something, but I guess they are going to. But the first one's going to be that one, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be, and they said there's not going to be any kind of like Jedi or like any kind of weird mystique around it. It's just like basically like military action kind of thing. You know, which I guess isn't really good all the time, but I mean it'll work for that. So. All right. Cool. So yeah, that's all the news we could catch up on with that. Jeepers, I'm sure there's going to be more stuff, before we record next time. So.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, it's about that time to wrap it up, though. It's late. We got to get to bed.
Good night.
Okay, see you later. Bye. All right.
This has been episode 13. I am your friend Claude.
And I'm cousin Adam. That's me.
See ya.
Bye.